Hey everybody, welcome back to another wonderful issue or episode of People Talking from a Social Distance. Today I have another one of our wonderful colleagues, the other individual in the English department who I know is very musically inclined, so I'm stoked to talk to her about that.
Right? We miss you, Eric, if you're ever going to watch this, but yes, we're holding down the fort for you musically.
And so we got with us today, Jen Miller. And I think we've had so like I feel like I've worked with you all these years, but we haven't, right? Like there's been stuff and stuff. So it's one of those interesting things where it's like, I know Jen. I haven't really worked with Jen for that long.
Yeah, I got a lot of that when I came back after taking 2 years off with my kids. I wasn't sure if I was coming back after that, but when I did, people were like, "Wait, did you leave? Wait, have you been here the whole time? When did you leave? Weren't you having babies?" Because it was just a whole long time of, yes, I had 3 kids in 4 years' time. And then after that, worked 1 more year. And then I took 2 years off with the kids. So that's probably why that has felt a little crazy. And I student taught many, many years ago with Eric Eggleston and Matt Anderson, and then taught somewhere else before coming back. So that might be why.
Well, and I think you can just take that as a positive, right? You're so integral to the building. We just assumed you were here the whole time.
Right. Yes. Yes.
So speaking of integral, I always like to start, and it's a question that I love to hear the different answers to. And when we think about education and educators, it's a big part of who we are as people. But if you were to apply a label to yourself outside of your profession, what would that label be and why?
So first, for sure, I would think about mom, since that's been the other large component of my life, and especially in this last year dealing with COVID, I've been equally straddling my kids' world, as a parent, and then my world here as a teacher too. But musician is the other label that I would love to chat about.
Okay. And so, as I said in the intro, I think we're both very musically inclined. I come at it from the bass guitar perspective. And so I'm always interested in creative processes because I think we all do it in a different way. So I guess that would be a good place for us to start is like, do you have a set process for songwriting? Is there a certain way that you go about doing it, or is it kind of just when something strikes you, it strikes you? What's sort of your process in writing a song?
So I don't have a process that I could like write down and define, but in just reflecting on it, I started writing songs when I was in high school, going through some challenging times. And I think for many artists, art is what kind of helps us through hard times. My husband likes to say, you wouldn't be writing any songs if life was good, Jen. So just like you'd have no inspiration to draw from. So in terms of process, I would say if I'm going through something challenging, especially if I just hit rock bottom, songwriting is what I go to. Just pick up the guitar and like see what I can find. I don't consider myself a talented musician in terms of musicianship, but I do love to tell stories and to use my voice and the chords that I know on the guitar to do that. And I like for music to assist in the telling of the story. And I guess that's the crossover of being an English teacher and a musician, right? Storytelling and song. So my process would be something bad happens and then I go reach for the guitar and a song comes out of it. And in the writing of that piece, whether it ever goes out to anybody else or just stays my own or between me and God or whatever, then that was what I needed to take a step forward and kind of heal. Not that I'll never write a happy song, but most of them are at least bittersweet. Is as generous as I'll be.
Yeah, well, that makes me think of a few things. So I guess my first question with that is, so do you always find yourself writing about the moment like soon after, or do you ever find yourself like diving back into previous moments to get inspiration?
That's an interesting question. And I don't think I've ever thought about it before, but I don't think there's very many songs that I've had to reach farther than like 2 or 3 years. Oh, I didn't mute myself. It's still gonna come through.
Okay, I've had to deal with that a couple times.
Okay. Yeah, I don't think I've ever reached farther than a couple of years. Most songs are in the moment. And I prefer to situate a song in a tangible time and space moment. And so while it usually is referring to a much broader theme, which is kind of where the healing takes place, it starts out with as much narrative detail that helps me just be in that actual moment. Does that make sense?
Yeah, totally. And that sort of connects to the second question I had, and it kind of steers it in that direction. Because I've talked a lot when I've had the opportunity to speak to people about writing this year about that idea of like narrative distance, of creating space between the event that happened and the thing you're writing about.
Interesting.
And so it seems like you're kind of doing, right? Like you're externalizing it in order to create something that then allows you to observe it and heal from it.
Yes.
Yeah, I like that a lot. I like that a lot. And I think, again, it's just that cathartic nature, right? Like, and I love that you said, even if it doesn't go out to anyone, because I know I've written stories where I'm like, no, this is never going to see the light of day, but I still feel I've gained something by writing it. So that's awesome.
And something that I think is so interesting is that often the pieces, I don't know if you feel this way about storytelling, but often the pieces that I wouldn't expect to have resonated with other people, especially because they're so personal or those narrative details are more specific. And so in my mind, I'm like, well, not everyone can relate to, you know, the blue house on the corner of whatever, whatever. But those often become the songs that are the most relatable, because I think it makes the listener feel like the reality of the person on the other end of it. I went to a writing conference in this art house in Minnesota one time with one of my longtime heroes. Her name is Sarah Grove. She's a songwriter. And her motto is creative community for the common good. And she said the same thing, like, we write for ourselves first, but then we use our art, our songwriting, our storytelling for the common good and put it in the context of community. And it can be a healing thing then for more of us and bring us together. So that's really cool.
That's awesome. Yeah, it reminded me, I had one of my professors at college, Doc Mensch, the poetry professor. Her thing was always, the more specific, the more universal it is. And she's like, it's not going to make sense to you. You're not going to think I'm telling the truth. But she has been so right about that. It's the same thing. It's like, I wrote about something that specifically happened to me that I was specifically feeling in this moment, in these circumstances. I'm like, no one's going to like this. And then I'm getting comments like, oh, this is amazing. This is great. Yeah, it's weird. Doesn't make any sense.
And those are the ones that you're the most vulnerable about too. And you're like, that's the one you want to listen to?
Right. I don't know.
It's just about love, you know, like, or whatever. Yeah.
So obviously you said that the songwriting has really helped you get through stuff and come out better on the other side. And I'm assuming that would include the current pandemic we are in. So have you found yourself being more creative during this time or writing more often than usual?
Yeah. I mean, not more often, I would say. The demands on time between teaching and my own 3 have made it so I've just had to be more strategic about time, I suppose, you know, like schedule on the calendar once a month or so, like sit down and just see if there's anything I need to have therapy for with myself, that kind of thing. And with some of the musicians that we write songs and play songs with in the community too, we've had to kind of schedule it out. But that's been good. That's been good to force me to be disciplined about it. And for many of us who are longing for ways to heal a little bit or just breathe a little bit, finding something creative and artistic, especially in connection with other people, I think is a great way to do it. Writing through this pandemic actually is like the theme of the whole album that we're working on. I didn't know it going into it. We've been calling it The Architect even before COVID happened, but it is about rebuilding after trauma. And when I started writing those songs, it was about some of the things that happened to me when I had my children and after I had my children, and some pretty severe mental health, postpartum depression kinds of things. And so the idea that we were going to rebuild me personally as a family, me back in school, that kind of thing, it is incredible to me that now here we are a year later after COVID, and that same theme, I just feel like boy, that was meant to be.
Yeah.
Right? As many of us are still like, even in me, I'm like, I don't know how we're going to rebuild. I don't know, but we're going to do it, and we can move forward. So, and my previous album was called Bravest One More Step in the Dark. So this is kind of a follow-up. That was like, it's still dark, but I'm going to take a step. And this one is like, I don't know how we're going to rebuild, but we're going to rebuild, right?
Always hopeful. Yeah, I like it.
Yeah.
Is there a set date? Is there a place where they can find either the upcoming stuff or the previously released stuff?
Yes. So we're on all the places. We're on all the places that you can listen to music. There's several Jen Millers out there in the world doing music. So we, when I say we, I'm referring to my husband and I, Keith. He's actually a Sycamore alum, born and raised here. And a good friend of ours, her name is Gail, and she teaches in the DeKalb School District as well. We're kind of the main three, but there's several other people in the community. Drayton at times has sung on some of our albums. So those of you that saw the Christmas song probably saw us doing some things together. So Jen Miller Music Collective is the name that we are under on Spotify or Apple or wherever. And then we also have the website, jenmillermusiccollective.com. And we're running our Kickstarter right now for album number 2, which is till April 24th. So the plan is to get into the studio. We use a little studio in Batavia that's in this like red barn. We're going to do that this summer.
Okay.
Yeah.
So everyone's going participate in Kickstarter and listen to some sweet tunes.
Yep. I was singing to my kids today. Yes.
And so I guess maybe we covered this in that, but in a lot of ways, I love teaching English because it helps me enlighten the things that I'm passionate about, right? Like we're doing Beowulf right now and I love it. We're doing Hamlet next and I love it. I love reading, I love writing. So if you want to continue with music, that's great. But are there other passions that your profession has helped you sort of either dive into deeper or help to enlighten in the first place? Like what other ways do you think teaching has helped sort of get you passionate about things?
For sure, teaching has helped me be passionate about community and community building and things really being important on a local level as opposed to like just broad go into the whole world, you know, especially when we're on social media all the time. It feels like the whole world is like right on our doorstep. And while in some ways that's true, where change really happens and impacting students, for example, in our profession or even our neighbors next door, right, happens on a local level, face to face in each other's lives over the context of like time. And teaching has that twice now in my life, I've considered doing other things. In college, the question was, do I go pursue music or do I teach? And then after I had my children, the question was, do I want to go back or do I want to stay home with them for longer? And both times the answer came back, I want to teach. And so I pretty much feel like I'm here now for the long haul, unless some other crisis happens. But, you know, this year was kind of crisis and I'm not going anywhere. So I think we're good, you know. But yeah, just that idea of community and focusing on the very faces that are in front of you and how you can have an impact there. And kind of back to the music, like how can you have a vision for what you're going to build and then work together to build that thing? Also, side note, I love design, and teaching has been an awesome place, especially this year, to try to be creative a little bit with how you like present things to students, visually speaking. I know you do as well. I see your art in the background behind you. Yes. So that's fun because we get to make visuals for kids.
Right. Yeah. Well, and even like create an entire ethos of like you kind of create a brand for yourself throughout the teaching, right? Like it's maybe not the correct, but it's what it feels like a lot of times. Like, right. Yeah, there's sort of an expectation of an aesthetic that we create as teachers, which is really interesting.
And I don't think that's a bad word, brand, especially in education, because we are competing with everything on here, right? Even while they're in the classroom with you, I'm like, lean into it. Don't be afraid of it.
Well, speaking of all of those things of sort of having an aesthetic or having a sort of mode that we sort of find ourselves in. I love, this is of all the questions I ask in these, this is my favorite question always, and it's the recommendation question. I kind of low key started this podcast so that I could get some reading picks from people, right? Like just throwing that out there. But like, I think a lot of times recommending a book or a movie or an album can show and can sort of convey so much about how you sort of view the world. So do you have a book, a movie, show, album, something that you think people could listen to, read, or experience and sort of have an understanding of the way you view the world?
Yes. I brought them. So my recent reading related to some of the things we've been talking about are Culture Care by Makoto Fujimura. And it is a faith-based book, but it is about being a gardener, metaphorically, to care for the culture that is all around you and using your art for good.
Yeah.
Awesome. Look, it's not that fat either. You can it goes kind of fast. So that's a really good one. And then similarly on that note, so this guy is a visual artist. This guy's a songwriter. One of my favorites for my whole entire life, his name is Andrew Peterson. He's a writer and he's a musician. And this is Adorning the Dark, Thoughts on Community Calling and the Mystery of Making. So again, like dive into the darkness, make something beautiful there, and then try to lead people out into more light with what you're creating. So those are my two.
Awesome. Those are both fantastic. I love that idea of having to like going into the muck to create something.
Yes.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah. It's not a clear cut like this. That's really cool. And with all the meditation stuff, there's that whole idea of like you cannot enlighten anyone else until you're enlightened yourself, right? Like you have to be okay and possess something that then other people can follow as a light. So that's really cool.
And sometimes it's okay to just let people watch you go through that process too. You know, like there might be moments where you're like, I'm not okay. But I can think of people in this building who in moments where I was not okay, like reached in and pulled me out. You know, there are people who have brought me ravioli, you know, when I couldn't bring myself to make dinner for my kids that night, who work in this building, for example, or who've let me stay at their house if I needed to or whatever. And so, yeah, I think you're right. In some sense, we can't pour from an empty vessel, right? But then in other times, it's okay to let people see like, not okay. And then for them to watch the story that comes out of that, which is really cool.
We can all say the vessel is empty today. Just deal.
It's full of this only. Oh my gosh. Yes.
That's awesome. I think oftentimes too, it's very easy for us to see our colleagues as sort of, that's that person who does that thing, right? Like this person likes X, Y, and Z. And so I often think it's fun to sort of talk about, you know, a surprising fandom or an activity or something where it's like, we wouldn't know that that's something you're interested in unless you told us. So do you have an example of that?
Yeah, I shared this with someone this year and they were surprised about it. And I was like, really? You don't? Okay. But so probably nobody knows this. Marvel movies, absolutely my favorite. I've spent the last couple of years with Keith, my husband Keith, pretty much our only date time. It's kind of sad also, but in the last couple of years of trying to survive, right? Most of our date time has been rewatching like the entire Marvel series in our moments that we can get them after kids go to bed. And of course, WandaVision on Disney Plus just finished, and now we're into Falcon and Winter Soldier. So if ever you'd like to discuss Marvel, I'm a huge sci-fi fan, A, and B, Marvel specifically is just what I happen to be on at the moment.
Okay. Do you have is there, of the arc, is there one that you what's that?
Well, totally depends what angle you want to come at it from. But if I had to just like pick a favorite, it would be Black Panther. I guess this is maybe an unknown thing. I have been to Africa, and some of my decision to come back and be a teacher is kind of all wrapped up and related to that trip that I took. So, and the cinematography in that one and the landscape, because of what it reminds me of, just absolutely my favorite. Yeah.
Right on. Yeah, right on.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I am adept at the Marvel stuff. I've done some looking in my time.
What's your favorite?
To be honest, I am a DC fan, but the DC movies have been awful. So
okay.
But like Batman, Flash, like those are characters that are like ingrained in my head since I was a child. So Marvel movies, I really liked Infinity War.
Okay.
That was I think a great job of taking 10 years of storytelling and just being like, and now it's nicely wrapped up and ready to go, right?
Yes. Except at the end, you're like, and half the world is gone.
Yeah. Well, yeah. But I knew there was a second movie coming, so I was like, it'll be fun. They already announced that there's going to be another Spider-Man movie. We're okay, everybody.
I know. Yes. Yeah, you're right. So many story arcs coming together, and for the most part, doing a pretty good job with it.
Exactly.
I want to know how many people are hired just to focus on one person's story and make sure in each movie that like the lines get tied together. Like, how many brains does that take?
Yeah.
Or am I like not understanding it and it's really just like one guy who's like tying it all together? I don't know.
It's just one like super comic book nerd at the back. He's like, well, actually, what's going to have to happen is
Yeah, I know. Yeah. WandaVision was amazing. Falcon and Winter Soldier seems to be going in a few different directions. So I'm interested to see where that turns out. And the new Captain America who's in that one, you're like, am I supposed to love him? Am I supposed to hate him? I don't know. So,
he definitely looks like the Costco knockoff brand of Captain America.
He does. Yeah, he does. Yes.
Next place I like to go is everyone's favorite topic. We all eat food. We all love food. So is there either a specific food you love to make or eat, or a specific restaurant or experience that you'd love to tell us about?
Cherry pie is what I would like to tell you about, because not only do I love it, it is what my grandma used to make for my mom on her birthday. So then my mom always made it for me on my birthday. And I've tried to give it to my children. They don't want it. So that's where it stopped, apparently. But it was like Pillsbury pie crust, a can of Wilderness canned cherries, bake it in the oven. And one year my mom tried to like fancy it up. And I was like, how do I tell her it's not what I wanted, Mom? But she was so proud of herself. So that was recent, actually. And I just had to be like, okay, we're moving on. This is what it means to get older. You have to take the not childhood memory and move on. So cherry pie, feel free to, and coffee. I'm surviving on coffee.
I'm a huge pie fan. So cherry pie, it's great choice.
Are you like a fruit pie fan, or do you like, like a cream pie or a nut pie? Does it need to have a top?
Usually fruit. If I have to choose like a desert island pie, it's apple pie all the way.
Okay.
With like the streusel crust.
Okay. Good. So like you lean in a cobbler direction almost.
Yeah.
Okay. Good. Cold, hot, with milk, without.
Doesn't matter. I don't do milk anymore with the vegan thing, but I used to love me some whipped cream on top. But even that now is like, I can deal with that. It's fine.
I got pie crust. I'm fine.
Right. Exactly. Right.
Now you bake.
Uh-huh.
But do you bake pies very often, or do you stick to cookies and bread and those kinds of things?
Much more cookies, bread, and cobblers. I somehow got the same gene as my mother, which is we can't make pie crust. We can make everything else perfectly, but pie crust always screws up. And
Pillsbury, I'm telling you.
I know. I just can't. It's the same thing. My brother's like, why don't you just make Pillsbury biscuits? I'm like, because biscuits aren't that difficult, and I'm not a Philistine. So, the last question you picked is one that I'm surprised more people haven't picked more of, and it's one that I think is great. And I mean, you already talked a little bit about this idea of the impact we have on our students and in our community, and I think this sort of plays into that. If there was one thing, I know one thing is tough to narrow it down, but if there's one thing you would like to change about the world, what would it be and why?
Okay, so I have a lot of thoughts swirling in my mind. Hopefully they come out articulated well. If not, maybe you can help me translate. It's kind of this strange thing that I feel like has happened with the explosion of the internet and social media and everything, which when I got my first cell phone when I was a freshman in college, I want to say, and a few years into high school was like AOL, dial-up, whatever. So my childhood wasn't like that. And then certainly over the course of my career, I've just seen it change, right? And now we have our students who 24/7 are, on their social media or whatever. I wish, and I don't know how to do it yet, but I wish that there was a way that we could change to harness the explosion of like opportunity to connect to other people and especially other cultures and other places in the world outside of Sycamore, outside of Illinois, outside of the United States, in a way that brought about that connection that I was talking about earlier, like that human relationship connection. Because I think our students are being exposed to so much, but it's not the right kind of stuff, where I'm like, it's not the same as if you could like see what it really is like to walk around in another place among another people group. And especially to help students. I mean, I think that's part of our jobs as high school educators, is to help students think outside of themselves, right? Because as humans, one, and as teenagers, two, they're very wrapped up in themselves. But I say humans first because we all tend to be wrapped up in ourselves. And part of our job, and what I love about literature, right, is that we can like open their eyes with literature. But I do feel this sense of just competition with the information tidal wave that is thrown at them. And I want to just step in and be a filter somehow for like filter out a lot of that tidal wave and somehow harness, like when I think about when I went to Africa, obviously, I don't know that we can replicate that exact experience other than to just send kids over there, right? But like there are things about that where there's a human connection and just an opening of my eyes to there's things outside of what I thought there was. There's things outside of my world because my world is like this. And I'm sad that with how much information and access they have online, their world doesn't seem to be getting bigger in a good way. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it's like,
out the right way, but
no, I think it's like this idea that their ability to sympathize has grown, but their ability to be compassionate has not. Right.
Right. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, like we know that it's out there, and we can be like, oh shucks, but we're not doing anything to really harness that power to help and to put ourselves in those positions and sort of see beyond the headline and the image that we see on our screen and understand the people and the human capital behind it.
Right. And for us, as we think about the next year and rebuilding and whatever that's going to look like, and there's still so many question marks, right? We don't even know if we can look up and say it's time to start rebuilding, right? Most of our brains are still like, whoa, we're just still like holding on for dear life. But I want to start thinking about ways, and we'll bring it back to art and creativity, like how do we help our students process what they've just lived through using whatever art is inside them that they probably don't know is inside of them. And similarly, how can we connect them to story outside of themselves, outside of Sycamore, in other places and times that are going to help lift them out? I don't know the answer yet, but that's what I wish was different. I wish that the flood of information that is coming to us, that is accessible to us, was better filtered for actual human connection. And I want to learn how to be a vehicle to help that with students.
Wow, that's a.
I don't have the answer. Sorry.
Yeah, I don't either. But that's a great goal, and that's a great sort of way of looking at it. Of what can I do to help make this something that it's that leave the place better than you found it, right? Figure out a way to sort of make it better than what you were given. And I think that's at the heart of everything we do in education. But it's great to hear sort of how you articulated that and how you sort of put that frame around it. Yeah.
Thanks.
I don't know. I was going to have like a whole highfalutin ending, but that's some pretty powerful stuff to leave everyone to think on.
I'll write a song about it, but I'll make it really specific. Let's see.
And it'll be bittersweet.
And it'll be bittersweet, and we'll get a slide guitar.
Okay. I'm
all the bittersweet part. Who plays slide guitar? Somebody who's watching this, write to me and tell me you play slide guitar. We might need it on the album.
Right on. Well, I just want to again thank you. This is awesome. We're both English teachers, but that blue hallway versus teal hallway, there's so much space. It's hard to get up there sometimes. So
I know.
I just want to thank you for your time. I hope you enjoyed our conversation because I sure did. And thanks for being a person talking at social distance with me.
Yay! Thanks so much.